This is also a question about Medicare, and it is for Mr. Guinta. I received in the mail about a week ago this brochure.
Up close on it.
Oh, I received from Medicare, from Representative Guinta, this brochure, which was rather frightening because it was directed to me as a senior, asking me to join with you in the fight to protect Medicare Part D. And the facts mentioned here, and we seniors have been assured that under the Affordable Care Act and under Congressman Ryan's plan, we will not be affected. But this brochure tells me that we will be. It says that the Democrats' plan for Medicare, higher premiums for Medicare Part D, reduced access to Medicare, and fewer choices. This is directed to us as seniors. So I'd like to have you an explanation for this brochure and some of the facts that led you to send out these statements.
May I see that?
Sure.
Barbara, can you get it, Barbara?
Okay, this is not from me. This is from, well, it says it's paid for by the American Action Network. It's not from me or my campaign. So it does talk about Medicare Part D, and it talks about a program worth protecting, and it says to call me to tell me to keep supporting Medicare Part D. Medicare Part D, I don't know if you want to get this back to, Medicare Part D is a prescription drug program for seniors that has actually, according to the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, came in under budget by 40%, directly because there is choice and options, and there are drug companies that are competing for your business, and it came in 40% under budget. And what that mailer is saying is it's asking for you to call me to tell me to continue to support that program.
Why? But you're telling me that the Democrats are going to raise the premiums.
I'm not, that's not from me. That mailer is not from me. It's not from me personally. My campaign is from some different organization.
Do you approve of that? Somebody sending this out with your name?
Well, anyone can send out anything they want.
Your name and pictures.
Well, that happens a lot. When you run for office, people...
Why don't you flag him down afterward and continue the conversation? How about another question? Would any of you vote for repealing the, what is it called, the Affordable Health Care Act?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I co-sponsored the repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
Okay. Would you?
Okay. Can you hear me? There. Well, first of all, Congressman Guinta was on the Budget Committee with Congressman Ryan, so if you like the Ryan budget, then this is one of the people in the committee that helped make that happen. No, I would not vote to end the Affordable Care Act. Already, 76% of all young people under the age of 26 now have health care. And I was reading what an insurance commissioner said, I think she's from Nebraska, saying, what a good decision this is, a good business decision, how this is helping to make insurance more affordable and hold down costs.
Very quick.
Go ahead.
So, there were two main objectives that the President had with the Affordable Care Act. Number one, reduce cost, and number two, increase access. When he first proposed it and it was passed by the last Congress, the estimated cost of the bill was $800 billion. The Congressional Budget Office, after the Supreme Court decision, got a new scoring of the bill. It is now $1.8 trillion. So when we talk about free, this is not free. Secondly, there is, according to the Supreme Court, this is a tax, a direct tax, not a fee, but a direct tax on Americans. And let me tell you what the Supreme Court means when they say that. If you don't have insurance, you have to pay a tax to the government collected by the IRS in year one, 1% of your salary. By year three, it's 2.5% of your salary. This is what's frustrating America. We all want to make sure that health care is accessible. We all want to make sure it's affordable. But the two things that this bill does, that everybody in this room should be concerned about, Again, according to the Congressional Budget Office, a month and a half ago, it took $716 billion away from Medicare to fund it. And secondly, this is according to the CBO, and secondly, it creates the Independent Payment Advisory Board, 15 unelected bureaucrats who, for Medicare recipients, determine whether you will receive the care that you particularly need in terms of certain kinds of procedures. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want 15 people in Washington making a determination on whether you're going to get any kind of specific medical need based on the Affordable Care Act. We can replace this with a different approach to ensuring greater access and greater affordability, but this does not meet those objectives. We call a little bit of a penalty the United States Supreme Court deemed a tax. They said it was unconstitutional based on the Commerce Clause, but it was constitutional because it's a tax. And what the Congresswoman just said she voted for is another tax on Americans. And that's what we've got to get away from and try to find a more effective way to reduce the cost for health care for people.
There was a hand up there.
Well, this young man has had his hand up for very long.
All right, sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's on, yeah.
Yes.
I want to change a little bit here because I think we're getting away from what it was that we said we were going to do, a forum, not a debate. And what I'd like to hear is some of your thoughts, each of you, regarding education in this country. What are we going to do about making our schools better? They may never be back to the level they once were. But the only person of all of you I've heard say anything today about education and the future of our country was Frank Guinta, and he didn't say very much. I would like to really hear how you think we can fix the screwed up system we have right now, especially in the public sector in this country. If we don't get that straightened out, get some control over unions in the schools, we're not going to get there, and it's a very sad situation we're in right now. What do you got to offer?
Right now at the federal level, we're spending about $80 billion a year just for the Department of Education. And what happens is we collect those dollars locally. It goes to the federal Department of Education. They will then take a cut of it, turn around, a portion of it, send it back to the states with mandates. That is not what we believe in New Hampshire to be local control. Most people in New Hampshire, most districts in New Hampshire, most teachers in New Hampshire want local control. When you talk about No Child Left Behind, you go into a school today, you talk to an administrator, you talk to a teacher, you talk to the principal. They're all frustrated with it. They're all frustrated with it. What we need to be doing is empowering teachers with more direct classroom instruction dollars to go teach their classrooms, to go teach to those students. When I was mayor of Manchester, we did a study on what the cost was for education. Administrative costs were about 60%, and direct classroom instruction was at 40%. That's not what I think is a good opportunity for education. Those numbers at the very least should be flipped. So we've got to get at the root of where the dollars are being spent. And I do believe in the local control option. I do believe that parents should have an opportunity to send their kids to charter schools. I do believe that parents should have the opportunity to decide where they think their children can get the best opportunity for education. And if we encourage that, I think you will see the educational institutions, public or otherwise, in the state of New Hampshire be improved, and I think you'll have a far better product over the long term. But when I go and speak with teachers, the one thing they will tell me is get rid of federal regulations. It is wearing us down. It is allowing us, it's forcing us to spend too much time on federal regulatory requirements and not enough time teaching students in the classroom.
Question over there. Floyd, have a question? All right, quickly.
Okay.
I know you've all said that we need a safety net for the most vulnerable in our communities. In May of this year, Congressman Guinta's picture appeared in Foster's Daily Democrat praising Meals on Wheels. The week before, Congressman Guinta voted for the Ryan Budget Act, which repealed the social services block grant, which deals with Meals on Wheels. It's money that the states get for Meals on Wheels and for transportation for the disabled and elderly. And about 23 million people are going to lose the benefits of the social services security block. Can you explain how you praised it one week and voted against it the week before?
I think Meals on Wheels is a great program. It's a necessary program. I participated in it and raised money for it when I was mayor, and I support it now. What we did in the committee was look at every single program, every single administration, every single dollar that's spent, and we did an analysis of how we could improve programs and the direct service to programs. So you'd be interested to know that that program is under the nutritional programs, which has gone up 270%, 270 over 10 years. So what we did is reform 4% of overhead expenditures over 10 years. So that's this big, large cut that people are referencing. We didn't reduce direct dollars to those in communities. We looked at discrepancy, at overlap in the programs, reduced overhead in the programs, put that savings back into the program. And when you think about it, a program that goes up, any program, 270% over 10 years, you got to ask yourself, why is that happening? What I think we need to be doing is look at every single expenditure and try to figure out how we can make it more effective, how we can make it more efficient. And that's because we have a long-term debt of 16 trillion, just turned 16 trillion today. We've got a structural annual deficit of about 1.1 to 1.2 trillion dollars. We've got to look at the entire budget and figure out where we can make reforms and improvements. And then on the revenue side, where we can grow our economy, have more taxpayers paying into the system, and make us, structurally, financially sound nation again. So we're going to continue to focus on areas of improvement where we can have direct services improved while reducing any kind of overhead or unnecessary expenditure, and make sure that that dollar goes directly to the recipient.
Question over here.
Could I answer, please? I could be wrong, but I thought each one of us was going to answer, and I would
All
really
right.
like to answer that.
Well, I thought the question was directed to him.
Do I have the format wrong?
Yes, go ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I apologize. I thought each one of us could have a chance to answer. Anyway, it's not so that there are not direct cuts. They are direct cuts. It's a block grant, and they certainly are direct cuts.
Well, that's just not true.
And one of the reasons that they have gone up is because people are living longer, and when you live longer, chances are that you are going to be faced with more illness that will have those impacts. And also you have to look at the question of whether we were underserving for a long time. So, and when there are efficiencies, I absolutely agree with the congressman that we need to find those efficiencies, but those are cuts in those programs.
Speaking of living longer, would you agree to increasing the retirement age for Social Security? Yes or no answer?
Yes.
I think it's something we need to, I think all issues need to be on the table. All solutions need to be on the table.
Yes or no?
I can say yes.
Yes?
Was that yes or no, Congressman?
I think all solutions should be on the table.
You won't answer. Will you answer? Yes or no?
I don't think we should raise the age for Social
Okay.
Security.
All right, question over here.
Congressman Guinta raised the question as to whether we would be happy to have Medicare in the hands of whoever runs it. I've been on Medicare for quite a number of years. I think and I've gotten help from them, and I think it works just fine. And if I have to choose between having Medicare decide whether I deserve money, or having an insurance company which has full-time people working to find loopholes to keep from paying people, I would much rather have Medicare. Now, Medicare, I've seen various estimates of overhead that apply to Medicare, and they run between 3% and 8%. And I've seen estimates of the insurance companies, health insurance companies' overhead runs between 20 and 30%. And you talk about how much efficient it is when there's competition. Well, there's competition among the insurance companies, and their overheads are vastly higher than Medicare. So how do you explain all that?
Well, I want you as the individual to have the decisions over your Medicare. What I was referencing is the Affordable Care Act changes that. The Affordable Care Act puts into place a 15-member board called IPAD, Independent Payment Advisory Board, appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. And that board will make decisions for every Medicare recipient as to change, whether, say you need a hip replacement or some sort of surgical procedure. The change that the Affordable Care Act institutes is that now that 15-member board will make that decision for you. I don't support that. I don't think that should happen. What I'd like to see is you in charge of the options and choices that you have for Medicare. And relative to the cost estimates that you were referencing, there are certain percentages of waste, fraud, and abuse in the system that need to be rooted out. We are working through that so we can put those dollars back into the system for direct care to the individual, to the recipient.
Wait a minute. Any other comments about that? There's a comment about that.
Okay, I'm surprised, right? First of all, the Independent Advisory Board is made up of, guess who? Experts. And they suggest to Congress, they give their best informed expert opinion, but Congress votes, not them. And so everything else it said is just, starting with the wrong premise.
That's actually not true. We're talking about every single procedure. This board will make those decisions.
Okay, this right down here.
I think a lot of us have been very, very discouraged by the performance of our legislatures. I think it's extremely discouraging to feel that we send folks down there and you all mill around and not much seems to get done except arguing. We're at a brink right now where a decision has to be made. And I'm just wondering what you see in the future. I'm pretty discouraged by the inability for people to work together and come to consensus.
One thing I'd like to say about that. So my kids are 9 and 7. And my wife and I think about and talk about how we want to raise our family. What values do we want our kids to grow up with? And I'd like them to think that public service is a noble thing. I think there was a point in our country when it was an honor to serve. Now, for me, it is an honor. We should be frustrated as Americans at what's going on in Washington. But the one thing that I can do as your representative is conduct myself in a manner that is respectful and responsible and to put solutions on the table. Now, in the House this past year and a half, I voted for 40 different jobs-related bills that had something to do with improving the economy, almost all of which, not quite all, but almost all of which, were passed bipartisanly in the House of Representatives. But most people in the country don't even know that. So I do my best to come home as a constituent service-minded representative to try to communicate that as best I can to everybody that I represent. Most of those, and we have it right on my federal website. It's guinta.house.gov. There's a tracker, a jobs tracker. There's a red button. If you want to go take a look at it, it shows you the bill, what the action was in the House, if there was action in the Senate, and if there was action by the President. Most of these bills have languished in the Senate. But my responsibility and my job as your representative is to continue to fight for the things that I think you want me to advocate and make sure that I am respectful and responsible to the people of this district, to this state, and to this country. And I do it with the understanding that I'm trying to teach my kids what it's like to try to get along with people. I work with people on both sides of the aisle. I work with Barney Frank on legislation that affects our fishing industry here in New Hampshire. I'll work with anyone, Republican, Independent, Democrat, doesn't matter what party label you are. What I want to do is move this country forward. And that's the way in which I think I can improve the system, and I can only ask others to try to do the same.
Thank you.
Any questions up here? Right there.
I'm very surprised at this meeting. We've been,
That same microphone?
I've been very surprised that we've been here for an hour and 15 minutes out of an hour and a half program, and we haven't put any time in dealing with such problems as the debt. The debt, $16 billion today. Trillion, 16 trillion today. We haven't talked about the gross national product and how to get that moving. We haven't talked about jobs, getting it moving, and that's very, very important stuff. And the discussion has ignored it. The other thing is, the Congress is not effectual, and you can't blame it on everybody, but maybe you could on Harry Reid, who stops things and won't take votes. I don't care what the way, but you ought to have votes, and you ought to live by your own rules, and we're not getting that.
Well, the House, last year and this year was the first time in several years that the House of Representatives actually met on the Budget Committee level, passed the budget out of committee, and passed the budget out of the House. The requirement by law is that that's supposed to occur by the 15th of April for the House and the Senate. The Senate ignored that responsibility. And the normal course of the way things are supposed to work is the House passes its budget, the Senate passes its budget, you have a committee conference to try to come to terms with the differences of the two. And that way you can set a course for your spending, you can set a course for any policy changes that need to happen, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in energy, whether it's in tax reform, you name it, that's the document by which we should be utilizing to make that happen. But the Senate does acknowledge that they will not do a budget. They have not done one for 3 years. That's problem number one. Number two, our GDP is equal to our debt. Our GDP is 16 trillion, and our debt today turns $16 trillion. That is not good, sound economic policy for any nation, particularly the United States of America. And when you look at how many months we've had unemployment, over 8%, which is 42 consecutive months, I think things do need to change. I think we need a pro-growth agenda that has tax reform in it, that on the corporate side eliminates loopholes, reduces the rate to be competitive around the world. We're at 35%. Japan just reduced theirs to 25%. Canada, our neighbors to the north, just reduced theirs to 15%. And when you are a job creator, you have a choice of creating jobs here in America or somewhere else where the tax liability is significantly cheaper. Where are you going to go? So we need to understand that and be competitive globally. On the individual side, we should broaden the base. We should reduce some of the loopholes, eliminate some of the loopholes. We should make it fairer, simpler, easier to file for every American. And then we need to put pro-growth and policies in place that are going to see the GDP grow at about 4, 5, 6% a year versus what's happening today, which is only 1.9% per year. You cannot have an explosion of the economy or job creation when our growth is at 1.9%.
And I have both voted with our respective parties about the same percentage. And that shows that there's an enormous difference. But we probably would agree that the Senate can be problematic. But the Senate can't vote on things that they think are just fundamentally wrong. For example, these jobs bills that the Republican House, they put the word jobs in everything. And it's actually become a big joke in Washington. because taking the EPA's authority to regulate mercury is not a jobs bill. And so they have not created any jobs bill, any real jobs bill that the president asked them to do. Now, they did pass a budget, but the budget was completely unacceptable to the Senate. That is not compromise, that is not trying to work it out. The House also has not passed their spending bills. They have trouble with their spending bills. So clearly there's a lot going wrong in the whole process there. But we do need to have some revenue so that we can create infrastructure, which will create jobs. We need to have an effective jobs bill. We need to put more money into small business. We need to help them export. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. Income taxes. If you look at corporations, the congressman's right that we have a high corporate tax rate. But what he didn't tell you, but CNN Money will tell you, is that 2/3 of those companies pay 0 in federal income tax. So now we have a former senator, Judd Gregg, who said, you know, we need to talk about revenue. We have to have both on the table in order to pay down some of these bills, reinvest in our country, invest in job creation, etc. And that's a conversation that is missing on the Hill right now, missing in the House of Representatives. Where will the revenue come from? And you have to somehow, if you look at the Ryan budget, which Mr. Guinta supported, and you realize that if the Ryan budget actually was adopted by the Senate, that the man who would like to be president of the United States, Mitt Romney, would now pay an effective rate of below 1%, while the middle class would still be paying quite a bit from their income. So that's not how you get revenue. So we've got to have some revenue. It has to be fair. It can't come from the middle class. It can't come from retired who are struggling to get by. It has to come from corporations, and I encourage them to come back to the United States. I think we should encourage them. We should do everything we can for the manufacturing sector, you know, tax credits, tax cuts, everything. But when the day is over, somebody has to have some revenue coming in. There has to be a compromise there about bringing revenue into this country. And the reality is that if people like Mitt Romney pay less than 1%, this is only going to get worse for this country.
Well, I think the way you get revenue is to put more people back to work.
The
And
jobs
then you will have more money coming into the treasury. So those 40 jobs bills that we voted on in the House of Representatives, most of them were supported bipartisanly, Republicans and Democrats, both demanding that the Senate take action.
You want to ask a question?
I'd like just yes or no from each one of you. How many of you would be in favor of raising the tax percentage on people earning more than $250,000 a year?
We voted in the House to extend rates at the lowest, at all rates. We've done that twice. And even the President of the United States has said that in a down economy, you don't raise taxes on any individual. So we're hoping that the Senate will extend the existing rates. I don't support raising taxes at this point. I think that the economy is a significant challenge. Ernst & Young came out with a report that said about a month and a half ago, it did an analysis of the President's proposal, which is to raise taxes on 250 families, 250 or over. And the report, according to his budget office, that brings in about $70 billion. We have a deficit of 1.2 trillion. Ernst & Young said that your growth rate would get down to 1.3% if you did that, if you instituted that, and said that you would have 700,000 jobs that would be lost as a result of that policy. It's bad economic policy, it's bad for growth, it's bad for revenue.
I have the final question. This is a question that was handed to me earlier in the afternoon. Question is, seniors' savings for income in retirement were devastated by 2008 financial abuses and fraud. How do you stand on strengthening financial regulations?
I think one of the biggest concerns was that the individuals who were performing oversight, like the SEC, for example, were asleep at the wheel, and they let us down. You need to have reasonable and responsible oversight. Those who actually committed violations of the law need to be prosecuted, and we need to send a very strong message that if you are going to violate the law, that you're not going to be in business. You're going to pay a consequence to that. And that hasn't happened yet. So we need to ensure that that does happen. I also do want to see a very, very sound financial, institutional operation. So whether you're investing or whether you're purchasing a home, which for many people is a long-term investment, that we have the opportunity to do that. And you need a sound economy in order to do that. We have to have sound financial footing in the financial industry in order to do that. But there's no question that people, individual entities like the SEC, were absolutely asleep at the wheel, and that never should have happened. I also want to thank everybody for coming today and spending some time with all four of us. This is an important way for us to interact, not just here in New Hampshire, but it needs to happen across the country. I believe in America that will ensure that we have a prosperous nation. And that means a sound economy, an opportunity for our kids and our grandkids to get a great job and turn that into a great career, to take care of their family, to be able to ensure that we preserve and protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and do it in a fundamental way that makes it sound for the long term. I think there are a lot of challenges that we have, but I think we're also, as a nation, up to the challenge. I think as individuals, we're up to that challenge. And I think it's so incredibly important that we make sure that we elect the right people across this nation who are willing to offer solutions, be factual about what's going on in this nation, be willing to give you the honest truth about how Washington is spending your money and the decisions that Washington is making on your behalf. And I would be honored to serve again as your representative to Congress. And I certainly ask for your support in September and the November election. And I will continue to make sure that our offices are accessible to every constituent, that I'm as accessible as possible. As I mentioned earlier, I travel to Washington every week. I come home on the weekends and for district work periods, so I can be with my family and be with my constituents. Because it's the people in this room and it's people across the country, across the state, that will determine what's so critical and so important, and how your representative votes on your behalf. So thank you very much for this opportunity today, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.